رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين وأصحابه المنتجبين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأمير المؤمنين عليه الصلاة والسلام. I'm going to discuss about Al-Imam, our beloved first Imam, and why it was such a great loss to the Muslim Ummah that he wasn't given his rightful position as the first Khalifa and successor to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, I know people get offended and they find this topic a little touchy, and they say, well, why do you need to discuss it? The fact is that without meaning to offend anybody, it's not a question of offending anybody. We have a right to be objective and to present a perspective. And I really do feel that when we look at Amirul Mu'mineen, we find such an accomplished individual, an impeccable person. For me to use these words takes something, I don't use them very lightly. An impeccable person, accomplished person, a person, when it comes to him, I begin to reassess my theology and begin to say that, well, why can't Amirul Mu'mineen be rubbing shoulders with the grand prophets of God? What is the evidence? I mean, obviously we don't want to compare anybody, but just to appreciate the man for what he is. Why can he not be of the same caliber, of course, other than the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, greater than whom the world has not seen? Why can he not? By just looking at his caliber, it makes me reassess my own theology and to try and understand it afresh, that what is this man all about? Now you might ask, and you might say, well, what difference does it make whether he was the first or the fourth? He eventually came and held the reins of authority. It makes a huge difference. You see, when Adam was told, وَلَا تَقْرَبَا هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ فَتَكُونَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ, do not go near this tree, you will become of the oppressive ones. Yes? But Adam rushed to that passage, that doorway, and came into this world. The fact is that Adam wasn't ready. And hence the toil, what we are seeing in this world. Adam was me and you, according to the verse of the Quran. خَلَقَكُمْ ثُمَّ صَوَّرَكُمْ ثُمَّ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ. We created you and we fashioned you, and then we said to the angels, prostrate before Adam. So we were all Adam. Basically, we weren't supposed to come to this earth so prematurely. We were supposed to have learned some lessons there before exiting that place, before going to that passage or going to that doorway that Adam rushed to. As a result, we've had to learn things the hard way. Now, the community that reverted or converted in the time of the Prophet was towards the end of his life. Yes? As the surah of the Quran says. And people will come to you, أَفْوَاجًا فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ. People will flock to you. This flocking of the people to the Prophet Muhammad was towards the last years of his life. They did not understand the meaning of governance, of the prophetic model, of what it means to be a leader, of how to lead a proper life, of what was at stake, of what the Prophet Muhammad was trying to do. All they understood was a very simple message. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, praise Salah, Amar bil Ma'ruf, Nahi anil Munkar, but they did not know properly how to bring those things out beautifully from within themselves, how to lead a spiritual, God-centered life, what it means to be a moral person, what it means to keep the here and the hereafter in a state of balance and then lead a life, how to make this world a means for the progression of the human soul towards Allah. All they understood was do good and you will get reward for it. That's all they knew. They did not have a practical model in front of them. Now imagine, had Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi been the first Khalifa, he would have had 30 years to establish a righteous, godly, spiritual and moral model for Muslim leadership. And we all know this, and there's a hadith, but we don't have to listen to hadith. We know this from our experience, that the characteristics of a leader are far more influential upon us than our own parents who have raised us. Mr. Tony Blair, when he came, we were all so hopeful, weren't we? It was such a breath of fresh air. But look at what he did to us, where he took the country, and we are still paying for it now. In fact, when we elect a leader, it says what we are all about. And then when a person comes, even though we say we are democratic people and there's representational democracy and whatnot, seriously, for the most part, these are just words that delude us. If a strong leader comes, they can convince us, contrary to our better understanding, and lead us to a path that they want to, and we will give in. It just needs a confident person to come and to lead us, and we will give in. For the most part, we are people who like to give over responsibility, to delegate it to others. So this is why, had Ali ibn Abi Talib come and those 30 years had been given to Ali ibn Abi Talib, he would have established a model, a righteous model. Now my problem is not with the Sunnis or the Shias, my problem is with everybody. You see, today's Marja'iyya system that we have, it's supposed to be, according to the Marja'iyya calculation, it's supposed to be divine leadership, isn't it? At the end of the Ghaybatul Sughra, the leadership was given to the Ruwatul Hadith, and it's progressed and evolved to this level. But it's the leadership of a person who is accomplished at jurisprudence. They don't know what it means to be God-centric, to create a God-centric government, to create a God-centric society, to create a moral society, to understand Sharia in a way in which it leads to a purposeful collective existence of human beings where they start becoming godly. The Sharia is applied for the sake of applying it even if it defeats the whole purpose. Yes? Can I just put in a sarcastic comment at this point, as you're accustomed from me, to listening from me, yes? You know the verse of the Quran? كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Dr. Nobahar said, no, it should have read لَعَلَّكُمْ تَمُوتُونَ. Fast has been prescribed to you so that you might die out of hunger and thirst. 22-hour fast, come on. Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi would have modified these things, yes? Obviously, don't look at me like that, it's frightening. Lighten them, smile a little. It's fine. Don't worry about it. God doesn't become closer to us, by being serious. Smile. So now, Ali ibn Abi Talib's example would have been the most befitting one. What happens is that he himself has said in Khutbah Shakshakiyah, وَأَنَّهُ عَلِمَ أَنَّ مَحَلِّي مِنْهُ أو منها كمحل الكتب من الرحى. Ibn Abi Quhafa knew, Khalifa Abu Bakr knew, that my position with regards to the position of Khilafah is like that of the axis to the handmill. The whole of the Khilafah rotates around the axis. The axis is a stabilizing factor. It allows everything to run smoothly. The Khilafah here is the Khilafah of Rasulullah. Rasulullah came to make human beings out of otherwise monsters and monster-like people. And you know how they were. And how he worked on them and where he brought them. The law system was there to bring about uniformity and greater growth, the regulatory system in terms of the ibadat and the muamalat. He regulated them in a spiritual way. He filled everything with morality, with godliness, even the mundane things. In the Quran, Allah says, when you are in a gathering and you are told to give space, then give space, Allah will give space for you. Allah is bringing Himself to this level. He's saying, look, I am there with you in a gathering. If you are asked to make space, I will make space for you. This is how close the Prophet of Allah brings Allah. When you are in secret consultation, be mindful Allah is a third one. You're not only two, Allah is also listening to you. This is how He brought God into everyday life, into the minds of the people. They became spiritual people. His leadership was not one in which He ruled by iron fist. He did not have those policies. You remember that example of the Prophet when there was a drought in Medina, and they said, oh Prophet, fix the prices. And he said, inni yakrahu at-tas'ir. I will not fix prices. If these people cannot be moved from their greed by the promise of the hereafter and the good pleasure of Allah, then no amount of policies from the government that impose upon their freedom and restrict them will reform them. Reformation has to come from within. The Prophet of Islam never came to rule upon people by the harshness of the law, that this is the punishment. He said, you are worthier people. You are a worthy person. It does not befit you to lie. Awful kayla wal mikyal. As Nabi Shu'aib said, give proper measures. You don't need to cheat. Allah will sustain you. What Muhammad Rasulullah did was, he appreciated people's humanity. He looked beyond the immediate. He did not care for power for the sake of it. He understood the khilafah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and wished to bring out a best possible community. You know, when I talk about pluralism, the mullahs, they argue that there's a verse of the Quran, yes, and take jizya from them and wahum saghirun. But they don't understand. When we don't want to read a verse for what the verse is saying, we will read whatever we want into it. The verse says, and as for the people of the Ahlul Kitab, who do not believe in Allah or the last day, وَلَا يُحَرِّمُونَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهِ, and do not make haram what Allah has made haram, then those people take jizya for them, وَهُمْ صَاغِرُونَ. Yes? Not all the Ahlul Kitab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks so profoundly of the people of the book in the Quran. Yes? It gives them paradise. You know what the fiqh says? When you go to take jizya from them, pull their beards and hit them with the slipper on their head. Really? Is this, you think, Rasulullah has taught us? To go and hit them on the head, to demean these people? This is not what the Prophet taught. This is unfortunately the leadership that was established after the Prophet went. And such harshness crept into Islam. Capital punishments, intolerance, lashing people, so on and so forth, treating them like animals. This is what Ali ibn Abi Talib says in the Quran. That I saw what was happening to the Ummah. It was as if my eyes were being pricked. There was a bone stuck in my throat. And then I thought, should I retrieve it with severed arms? Or should I persevere? Whereupon I decided perseverance was the better thing to do. He said, I saw them reserving the others of Khilafah strictly between themselves. And then Hazrat Osman came and his, obviously, nepotism and so on and so forth. Until the situation came to a level where the Khilafah had become like an unruly camel. If a rider were to pull its reins, to restrain it from running to its ultimate destruction, then the reins would have slit the nostrils of the camel, yes, and caused it to bleed to death. And if the rider were to let loose the reins, then it would go to its eventual destruction. This is when that godliness was taken out of the Muslim Khilafah. And this is where it ended up. Now, if Ali ibn Abi Talib had been the head and the first Khalifa, and he would have had 30 years to show the Muslims what it means to rule in the name of God for the sake of making people godly, today we would have had and possibly a very different world. Now you might say, but what's the point? We haven't got that, so why discuss it? Well, discussion for the sake of it is good in the first place. And secondly, if we can learn something, then it is even better. So Ali ibn Abi Talib was a just, righteous person, endowed with knowledge. He was a man of integrity. He was a man of his principles. When he came to Khilafah, I just want to give a few examples. When he came to Khilafah, they said, you know what? Politically, it is imprudential for you to remove these people, governors, from their posts. He said, I know. I know I'll suffer. He said, but my sense of righteousness cannot allow me to keep them there for what they have done during the previous Khilafah. It does not befit me to keep them there. I would much rather trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever time I have been given, establish a righteous Khilafah. This is how he was. You do remember that Khalid bin Walid waged a war on that community around Medina. And look at Ali ibn Abi Talib, his appreciation of humanity and human discretion, and how he nurtured people. He says to his ex-collector, do not approach them in a manner that you intimidate them. I'm not going to, of course, narrate the full khutbah. Please read it. He said, go to them in their watering place and say, Amirul Mu'mineen bids you salam. And he asks, does anybody have the wealth of God in their property? If so, direct me to your places. If not, he said, turn around, ascend your steed and go to the next village. And if somebody takes you, then tell them. Actually, I think I might as well narrate this. He said, then take them, because it's so beautiful. He said, then take them to their farms and tell them, when the livestock is presented, tell them to split it in two. Then again, and again, every time give them the preference to choose the portion that they want to choose, until you end up with that amount of animals in which there is sufficiency for the due of God, and then take it with you. This is how he appreciated human beings, humanity. And that is the way a Khalifa ought to be, like a father, a caring father, respecting people. Why should I force you to give zakat when it is between you and your God? You are supposed to give it for your own sake, for the sake of your God, for the sake of your brethren in faith. There is no compulsion, there is no force in this act, according to the logic of Amirul Mu'mineen. And then look at him, emulating the Prophet at warfare. What he says is, if somebody swears at me, for the sake of that, don't be enraged. If a person has fallen, do not kill them. If somebody flees, do not pursue them or subdue them. If there are children, leave them. If there are women, and even if they swear at me, don't say anything to them. When you conquer them, do not burn their properties. Do not uproot the trees. Such sense of righteousness, such understanding of what warfare is about. It's not about killing and overpowering. It's all about understanding that people need to come towards righteousness. And look at his beautiful example in those khutbahs of his. He says, by Allah, it is easier for Ali to stand bare feet upon thorns all night long, and to be dragged on his face and chained, than to stand in front of Allah and the Habib of Allah on the day of Qiyamah, with Ali having a single crime and aggression and oppression against the creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where do you find a person like this? And then look at his sense of justice and righteousness when he says that if I were to be given the 7 heavens with all its bounties, and if I were to be asked in return to extract a husk of barley from the mouth of an ant unjustly, by Allah, I would not do so. Such would have been the righteous Khilafah. Now his letter to Uthman bin Hunayf in Basra, when Uthman bin Hunayf was invited to a banquet, he writes to him immediately. The community, as Ayatollah Muntaziri wrote some 30 odd years ago, about Amirul Mu'mineen's system, the way he was being reported to. He said, Uthman, I have heard that you were invited to a banquet where only the rich and the affluent were invited and the poor were left uninvited. How could you do that? You are my representative. You are supposed to emulate me. You are nothing to do with affluent people and people of power and people of show and the people of the world. You are here on behalf of me for the people of Allah. How could you even partake in such a banquet? Just imagine if today's marja'iyya were to live by these examples, that have full control on your wakala, have full accountability on the monies that is coming to you. Imagine. Do you think the man who used to sweep the Baytul Mal at night and he would say, Ya dunya ghurri ghairi, ya fidda wa ya hamra, what was he saying? Ya bayda wa ya hamra ghurri ghairi. or white or red. Go and deceive other than me. فَإِنِّي طَلَّقْتُكِ ثَلَاثًا. I have divorced you 3 times. Do you think that person would have ever had such a system where there was no accountability? This is what we mean by that righteous leadership. 30 years would have been enough for us. He would have established it. It would have been a godly community. It would have been a growing community where Islam would have been the force of change and godliness. Now look at his sense of his incorruptibility of Amirul Mu'mineen. When Aqil goes to him, do you remember? And he said, by God, Aqil came to me for a fistful of your barley. His children were with me. His children were with him. Their faces had become bony and color pale and hair unkempt. You know the story, right? But I'm just saying, that man would have been the one who would have shown us how to live. Now, if you look at his knowledge base and the way he talks about Allah and Tawheed and his du'as, you just know, my God, this is the one that God has sent. He's one of the hand-picked ones of God. And if you look at his knowledge about cosmology, I mean, 1,400 years ago when Aristotle got it so embarrassingly wrong, the universe, even the great Ibn Arabis and all these great venerated saints that we have that claim that they've been inspired by Ruhul Quds, miserably wrong. Look at the cosmology of Ali ibn Abi Talib, like phenomenally accurate. The way he would just say things, the eloquence with which he would say it, his spirituality, his knowledge, his politics, in every way, the man stands out. Had it not been for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there would be no equal to this man. I mean, I am saying this, and forgive me if I'm in any way offending anybody, but I really don't see in history a person like this man. Every aspect of him needs to be studied. And it is quite right for us to say to the Muslims that, look, we need to understand this, that he was the most eligible. And with him not being there, the loss is the loss of the whole of the Muslim Ummah. And I asked the Shia, before I finish, obviously my time has gone, I asked the Shia, you bang on about this and you beat your chest and head as is your practice all the time. Okay, fine. We say Imam Ali was the first Khalifa, now what? The fact is that the Shias don't learn from him. They just want his name to be there as the first. That's about it. Is it as lame as that, honestly? What difference will it make? We put him first or fourth. You're not going to learn from him anyway. Neither are you or the rest. Can you see that? If really Imam Ali meant anything, then we would be looking at his example. From everywhere, our hierarchy, right down to the grassroots. His moral, spiritual, righteous, godly example. And how he lived and how he was. Now think about this. 2 incidents, how brilliant and godly this man is. When he is assassinated, Ibn Murjim runs. When he runs, there's a frenzy that Amirul Mu'mineen has been killed. When Khalifa Umar was assassinated and the assassin fled, there was great confusion. People unsheathed their swords and killed anyone who was fleeing. And so many innocent people were killed. When Amirul Mu'mineen fell to the ground, he cried out, Abdul Rahman ibn Muljim is the one who has assassinated me. La yuqtal bi illa qatili. No one but my assassin and killer should be killed. Don't touch anybody else. Imagine at that point he is that mindful. And the narration of the night, obviously it was a lengthy khutbah that he gave, but one of the things he said was, لا ألفينكم تخوضون في دماء المسلمين تقولون قتل أمير المؤمنين. Let me not find you spilling the blood of the Muslims, shouting out that Amirul Mu'mineen has been killed. This was in reference to the assassination of Khalifa Uthman. When Uthman was killed, this is what the Muslims did. There was this slogan that Amirul Mu'mineen has been killed, and civil war erupted. So he was saying, look, I do not want, O sons of Hashim, for you to do any of these things. And then As I finish, look at the way in which this great man is. He says to Hassan, if I am killed, then it is your right to take a life in place of a life. But if I live, then it is my right to forgive this man. And he says to him, was I not a good imam to you? And he said, you were. What led you to this crime? He said, أَفَأَنْتَ تُنْقِذُ مَنْ فِي النَّارِ. He said, oh Ali, will you save the one whose destiny is to the fire? Imam Ali said, Sadaqt. You have spoken the truth. Ibn Rahman ibn Muljam to him. He says to Hassan, I ask you for my right on you that you will give him to drink what you drink. You will give him to eat what you eat. This was the man. Even at that stage. He is on his deathbed. And as death penetrates within his limbs, he says, O messengers of God, irfaqu bi, be gentle with me. He turns and says to Al-Hasan, wash me with the same hunut that was brought for the Prophet Muhammad. When you do my Salatul Mayyit, recite 7 takbir. After me, you will not pray it on anyone, apart from Mahdi when he comes. Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein break into tears. And they say, oh Father, La yawm ka yawmik. There is no greater grief than the grief that we feel on this day. Imam Ali looks at Imam Hussein and he says, no child, there will be no day like your day. You will be the shaheed of this ummah. He makes his wasiyah and his forehead breaks into sweat and perspiration. He looks and he says, فَلِمِثْلِ هَذَا فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. For the sake of this, the paradise that you observed, he said, for the sake of this, let the people compete against each other. He looked at them. He bid them farewell. He said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. He breathed his last. There were cries that arose. I will say, O Zainab, today benevolently Kufa comes to you as the cries rise from your house. Tomorrow in Karbala, the people will converge again to your tent, but not with sympathy, but in order to burn your tents, to set them alight. They will trample upon your children, and they will take you captive, O Zainab. Al-Hasan and Hussein bury Imam Ali. As they return, on the outskirts of Kufa, there are ruins, and there are cries. Oh, for my friend. Oh, for my companion. Hassan and Hussein go inside that house in the ruins and they find an old man. They understand that the man is blind. So they go near to him and they said, what be the matter? He said, I have a friend that comes and feeds me every night. He hasn't come for some nights. They said, oh man, is it food that you want? He said, no. It is my companion that I ask for. They say, oh man, describe your companion. He said he would come in the depths of the night. He would feed me with his hand. They said, what else? Did he tell you his name? He said, no. He kept it from me. He said, describe him. They said, describe him. He said he would sit against the wall and he would talk with me. He would entertain me. They said, and anything else? He said, yes. He would engage in the remembrance of Allah. And as he would remember Allah, the air around him would all sing the praise of Allah. They said, is there anything else? He said, yes. He would breathe a deep breath, a sigh, and he would say these words, Miskeen, jalisun miskeen. Gharib, jalisun gharib. A poor man sits with another poor man. A stranger sits with another stranger. They say, oh man, that was our father. That was Amirul Mu'mineen and the Khalifa of Allah. He has been killed and we have buried him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of Amirul Mu'mineen, forgive us our sins on this night. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring unity in this ummah of the Prophet, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this world a better world for us to live in. Rahmallah man qara al-Fatiha.